I'm going to call this meeting to order. We have an agenda. Does anyone, have we got someone to move the agenda? Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek. Any additions, subtractions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Passes. Item 3, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of ARC Thursday, September 27th be approved. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sanik, seconder Councillor Schell. Any objections, additions, subtractions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Anyone got a pecuniary interest in this? Apparently not. Delegations? None. Briefings? None. I think we got questions, but we don't have any of that. 7A is the first item of business, child care and early on programming update. Does staff have anything wish to say? Go ahead.
I'm happy to give a super quick kind of overview, if that's helpful, through you, Mr. Chair.
Usually that's useful.
Okay, good. This first report is really just an information report with some childcare and early on updates. Couple of elements that we discussed in the report. I will start with the early on updates and then focus on childcare and some kind of bigger picture planning that we are going to undertake. The early on updates, as you probably recall, as a city, we are now also the service manager for the early on programming as of January 2018. After a short transition period with request for information, request for proposal, we are now working with 3 different service providers in the community and in the county, the Boys and Girls Club, the Kingston Community Health Centers, and Rural Frontenac Community Services. And they are delivering early on at this point at 24 different sites, both in the city and the county. After the first 3 months of operations, we've done some initial stats, and we had about just over 900 individual children and about 800 parents that have used the program, resulting in about 9,000 visits, which is very positive. We're very, very happy with that. Obviously, we're kind of rolling out the program, so we're really using that data and opportunities to survey parents and work with service providers to continue to look at sites. Are we still at the right place? Are we providing the right programming? Are we providing the right kind of scheduling? In addition to the kind of program rollout, we also have in kind of with the budget envelope for the operational, we also received some capital dollars. So we have worked with the 3 service providers to help them with some capital dollars to renovate some of these sites that are currently operational or will be operational moving forwards. So that's the kind of the early on part. From the childcare side of things, obviously back in 2017 with the previous government, there was a lot of expansion dollars and a lot of kind of new policies and frameworks around expansion of childcare. With that also came some additional money. As of now, we have received some minimal information around kind of what childcare is going to be moving forward. As you have seen in the report, we know a little bit more. We are going to move into some multi-year agreements rather than one-year agreements. We have a little bit of decrease. We received some decreased funding, which is not impacting our programming, and they are taking out the cap on the not-for-profits and for-profits funding. However, that's kind of it, and we obviously don't know. We don't have we cannot look into the future, but we do anticipate that there will be some more kind of announcement made. In addition to that, we also we are mandated to start creating a systems plan, which is the first of its kind, and as a service manager, that means that we, and as you can see in the report, are going to do some more holistic consultation with our providers, with the general community around childcare and early years and early years development. So kind of with that, and we'll have to do that in the next 6 months or so, and we'll obviously come back to council. Plus the kind of uncertainty as of now of childcare and the provincial direction, we are extending our service agreements with our current childcare providers with 1 year. And then obviously hoping that next year we can work towards a longer term agreement and also can look at kind of how that funding and how the support will look like. I think that's it from kind of a brief introduction. I think that's pretty much what's in the report. So,
any questions from the committee? Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was interesting about the for-profits now can become part of the program. Has the province said that there's a ratio that you can, how you can divvy up the money? Because it could get a little tense, I should imagine. So how will that be accorded to the different types of providers?
yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, so we actually used to have a ratio. We had, about 25, 75, so 25% or maximum 25% of the providers could be not for-profit and then 75 not-for-profit. Currently, like the province basically took off the ratio. So it's kind of demand-driven. So if technically we would have the opportunity to have more for-profit service providers in our system.
Any other questions from the committee? Oh, go ahead.
Just a general question about the degree of uncertainty. I know that the Wynne government was headed into lots of childcare, that it looks like it's the city that's being asked to administer these programs, but you can't do anything unless the money is there. So is that a big part of this? I mean, I think that's what it is in this report, that staff are in a way just on hold right now, waiting to find out what's going to happen with the new government.
Yeah, we're really in a bit of a holding pattern. We also have an opportunity with the systems plan to actually go out and have conversations with our stakeholders, with our community, and kind of look at obviously we have documents such as, for instance, our population projection, which is in draft right now, but there's some good things that are coming out that we can look at the future of childcare and the future of early childhood development. I think it's also a great opportunity as a city to kind of look at our role. And yes, there's definitely some uncertainty. I'm not going to speculate. I mean, there was obviously a social assistance announcement today, but kind of everybody's in a bit of a waiting or holding pattern, if you may say.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I've got a couple of questions. Just wondering where we're at in terms of wait lists. Do you know that? Like in terms of childcare, and I suppose it early on doesn't work quite the same way because they have to go, right? So you can respond to that any way you like, but I'm just wondering what the wait lists for childcare were, because the big problem is there aren't enough of them and they cost too much for the average person.
Okay.
If I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, no, happy to clarify. So we have, basically we are providing, so through the province obviously, and it's a bit of it's a dollar for dollar. So we really are flowing through dollars. We currently are putting fairly limited dollars or next to no dollars from our municipal budget into this program. So for the childcare, obviously early on, you're correct. There's no wait list. It's a drop-in program. I mean, there are situations that there's obviously a capacity. So maybe if it's a very successful sites, and there's too many parents wanting to use that specific site, and it has to be at some point there's a limit. So obviously that is something we look at moving forward, like, we need to diversify this neighborhoods, or that we need to add the sites or change the timelines. For the childcare side of things, so we are providing childcare subsidies based on income, and currently we don't have a wait list for that. So if I'm a parent and I would like to put my children or child into a childcare spot, there is no wait list. However, there could be a wait list at the centers. So depending on where I want to go with my like, there could be some centers would maybe not have spots for me. So from a city, as a service manager,
Be clear about, there's no wait list system-wide. Is that what you're saying?
so there's no.
But there may be wait lists at particular childcare centers.
Yes, correct. So
Okay.
there's no wait list for the subsidy because we are able to respond to those requests. As of now, there has been a wait list in the past. It's kind of a bit of a ebb and flow, but it's more around specific centers, specific areas, specific neighborhoods. And that's, again, part of our work moving forward, to look at those that supply and demand and access of certain centers. I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. Part of this gets confusing because if you read the Toronto papers, it's like a whole different ballgame there. And there are lots of people that want childcare, but they either can't afford it or they can't get it.
Yeah.
Now, I take it what you just said may apply in part, at least there as well. But
Yeah.
in Kingston, we don't have a system-wide wait list. But if you want to go to a particular center because it's close to home or work or whatever, then you may have a problem.
Exactly. So there
Okay.
could be a spot in the East End, which if you're in the West End and you work downtown, it would not necessarily be convenient. But there are spots, again, it's not ideal, and there's definitely some work to do, and it also could change depending on the kind of supply and demand, or the demand, I guess, that's coming. And then obviously the one thing that is the most challenging are the infant spots. So this is kind of up to 18 months. That's kind of where we see the most challenges. Again, typically there is a solution. There is a spot somewhere, but it might not be ideal.
So that's all very interesting. I had another question, just one sec. Okay. I think that's okay. So, and we don't, basically what I heard you say, and it's in the report too, is we really don't know what this government's going to do. So we're just bracing ourselves.
We are. It's a holding pattern. And I think I just wanted to clarify one thing. Obviously, I think in general, there's quite some confusion and there's a lot of questions for parents around childcare. Obviously, we as a city are funding licensed childcare. There are also a lot of childcare providers that may not necessarily be licensed. So I think it's always kind of, if we hear parents having trouble accessing, sometimes it could be also the non-licensed that we, as a city, not necessarily have much influence on.
So the previous government changed it from that you were to give preference to the not-for-profit sector. And I believe that was related to consistent reports over the last 20, 25 years that not-for-profits provide better care at a better price. Is that not correct? Careful.
Yeah.
So you can say what you like.
Well, I was going to say that I am not sure. I know there is definitely, I think it's definitely an interesting kind of decision to move away from that. I'm not sure what the rationale is or what that looks like moving forward.
So if the province wants to move away from that, does that mean the city has to? The way it's worded here, I wasn't quite sure.
That's
Like,
it.
I thought, the way I read it, and it may have been purposeful, it might have been inadvertent, is that, okay, we're just taking that condition away, but it didn't really say the city had to move in the same direction.
Yeah, I would not sure
And
if we have
do you know what
to.
we're planning to do if that is
Yeah.
the case?
I'm not sure if we have that direction. However, I do think it's something that we want to, with our outreach and kind of the plan that we want to create, that is definitely going to be a question.
Okay, that's fine. They say that when they made the change the last time, I noticed when it happened, there was a gap. Right? They just didn't say anything. But it's, if you've been following this as long as I have, it's pretty obvious. Just one sec. Does anyone in the public, we have one person want to say something or ask a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Frank Dixon, Williamsville resident. Thank you to Ms. Nordegren for her presentation and the questions and discussion so far. I got questions around three areas that haven't really been taken up yet. So number one is on the childcare side. What has been the impact of the absorption of the Syrian refugees, if any, in Kingston, with respect to the childcare spaces and availability? Second question is, I'm looking for more information on the licensed versus non-licensed childcare provider situation. I'm very far from an expert in any of this, so I'm really kind of learning as I go and learned a lot tonight. So is there information on like the ratio of the spots in each side of the system? And what does that have to do with the city's liability situation, if any? Right? If you have a licensed child care center and something happens, right? We all know that bad things can happen that we can hardly even imagine. And
Excuse me, your question is not in order
all right,
because that's not the nature of the report.
okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
And then the final question is, you spoke about the uncertainty regarding what the new government is going to do. And given that the next meeting of this committee is not for another 3 months, I'm wondering if council and this committee could be updated as soon as possible once you receive new information, and that may affect the city budget process. That's it. Thank you.
Do you wish to please respond?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I can respond to the first and the third question. I guess to start with the third, absolutely. We, when we will update council, typically when there are significant updates regarding funding and direction, policy direction and changes. So absolutely. Regarding the Syrian refugees, I mean, there's certainly a peak in arrivals of Syrian refugees in our community over the past few years. I don't have specific numbers here with me on how many of these families are utilizing childcare services. I know there are that are using our licensed childcare services and are benefiting from that. I don't have specific numbers, but I know they are using those services.
Thank you. So that was for information. So, do you have a question?
Just a quick comment. It's a kind of legitimate concern about the timeline and all of the news that seems to be getting dropped on us from the current government. I just wanted to point out that I don't know if Derek has spoken to you, but at the Arts Advisory Committee last time, we were going over the granting the granting program, and late February is going to be problematic. So it was pointed out that Arts Advisory, at the call of the chair, if needed, could have a meeting earlier to deal with that. It's a case of trying to get the granting juries together and everything, and knowing how much all of that has to be approved by this committee and then council. And it doesn't, that late February as our next meeting throws a wrench into that whole timeline. So you may want to touch base with Colin and see if we need to bump up that meeting to late January instead of February. And then if something comes up either on the whole housing portfolio or the childcare portfolio, that can be addressed at that time as well. Whoever the chair is, whoever the committee is at that time.
The clerk will reply.
So I am aware that there may be a special meeting to deal with the KCAF funding in January, should the composition of the new committee be interested. I should also mention that the February date would likely not change, as it would just be a special meeting for the sole item in January. And deviating too much from that schedule just creates confusion for the other departments working towards the February date.
Yeah, and perhaps knowing January date is set, just letting housing and social services know if they have something pressing that could come forward at that time as well. And I may not be on the committee at that time, but we'll see.
Okay, so the next item is the social housing situation. As it's called, social housing end of operating agreements, service management implementation principles and objectives. And there's a motion there. I'll read it now, what the heck. That council endorse the end of operating agreements, principles and objectives that presented in report number HHC 18006. So on this item, does staff wish to have something to say?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So yes, this is a report to ask for an endorsement of the principles and objectives of the end of operating agreement process that we are kind of embarking on as service manager. As service manager, we started with our agreements in early 2000s, and most of these agreements most of the agreements are tied to the mortgage end dates. And as you can see in, I think it's Schedule A, Exhibit A, a variety of these are going to expire fairly shortly. So back in 2016, Council was presented with the step-down funding and end of operating agreement strategy. And on top of that, we now have prepared some principles and objectives just to kind of give you an idea of what we are hoping to do moving forward. As the service manager, we do have the authority to negotiate, but we want to make sure that this kind of is clear to council, and we also obviously want to be as transparent as possible to the housing providers that we will be working with. So you can see on page 5 and page 6 that we identified some of the key elements that we will keep in mind when we are having these conversations with various providers. And I should mention that KFHC, so the Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation, is not part of this because we have a different type of arrangement with them. So our objectives and principles, and I'm not going to go and read through all of them, but you can kind of see that these principles are ranging from obviously us making sure that we are maintaining our levels of RGI units as legislated by the province, that we are also making sure that if we are supporting these providers moving forward, that they are using their own, that they're maximizing their own financial kind of capacity within their agencies. We obviously want to make sure that we are looking at their current, a viability of their own sustainability. We want to make sure that moving forward, this fits within our 10-year housing and homelessness plan, etc. So we have identified a list of these guiding principles, and obviously want to make sure that these that committee and council is comfortable with those moving forward. Just as a quick update, not in this report, but we have three, as I mentioned, we have three providers that currently are coming up within the next year, being Marion Homes, Lowborough Housing Corporation, and Dutch Heritage. So we've kind of started that conversation with them. And so far, these conversations have been quite positive, and all of the providers are very keen on keeping connected with the affordable and social housing projects or units, and we're also exploring opportunities to add housing to our social infrastructure.
Any questions from the committee? Pardon? I've got plenty. We can have, pardon? Yeah. Oh, go for it.
So these more independent housing providers, when their agreements come up, say Marion Homes, in theory, they could change from RGI units to market units. Is that correct? And that then we would have to find other spaces for the RGI units?
You are correct. I think through you, Mr. Chair, you're correct. It is possible. However, obviously, we have a negotiation around funding, and kind of there are some incentives to obviously keep providing RGI units. We did obtain some legal opinions as well in the past to make sure that we are able to kind of have some expectations around providing RGI units in affordable housing as well. But there's definitely, I think the somewhat challenge with this is every housing provider will have a slightly different situation. Specifically with Marion, they have a fairly viable operation, and for instance are keen on keeping the conversation going. Are also interested in continuing obviously to provide the RGI units, but there could be situations where there are housing providers that may want to discontinue that relationship, and we may have to have some of those conversations. But I think if I'm looking at the current kind of amount of various providers that we're working with, at this point, we're not concerned that we will have to scramble for RGI units and reach the 2003 level that we need to provide through our service level agreement with the province.
So any other questions from the committee? Because there'll be a chance for questions after we put this on the floor.
Okay,
So my plan is to go to the public, then come back, have somebody
okay,
move.
that's fine. I'll
This
hold
is
off.
normally the way we do things, right? So does the public have anything to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to Ms. Nordegren for her presentation. I'd like to refer to page 16, which has a complete list of the different situations, the different providers, and the dates and number of units. I got a number of questions about that. Okay, so looking at the three that staff member highlighted as coming up for renewal, which is the Loughborough, the Marion, and the Dutch Heritage, right? All in dates coming up to us soon. I'm wondering why the North Frontenac nonprofit housing wasn't included in that group, since it's has a 2020 expiry date, or at least on part of its holdings there. It looks like there's a group of them. So okay, that's just one. It's a very minor question. Second question has to do with the rent supplements category, the second one down from the top. And we see there's a listed as various with a 438 units involved and a varying array of expiry dates. And I'm just wondering if we might be able to see a more detailed set of information with respect to that, because it is it's over 1/5 of the total number of units that are being considered is 2003 versus 438. So I'm just curious as to maybe some interesting details might be there. And the Townhomes Kingston file, as anybody who's been paying attention will know, is under a very major review as well. So lots of information there needing to be brought forward so people can understand what's been going on. I'm just sort of pointing that out. I don't have any specific questions, but I would say one thing. This committee would be an ideal place to bring information forward. It comes to council every 3 months, right, as we've been seeing. And I guess my concern there is that staff that have been managing that file, supposedly, maybe could have brought information forward earlier. And there's some conflict there as to who's saying what and who did what and that kind of thing. So it's a great concern to me, that file. I went to a lot of meetings of the committee. So I'm just saying I'm trying to understand what's happening with the file. I'm paying attention to it. I know a lot of other people are as well. So it's a very important file, and I'm wishing staff and council the very best with making good progress with it. Thanks.
Okay, so staff want to respond to that, please?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the North Frontenac question, so we are, obviously that they are on 2020 and Marion is 2020 as well. We are having conversations with Marion because they are also looking at some expansion. So we kind of want to see that in one kind of portfolio. North Frontenac certainly will be coming up shortly. Good question. The rent supplement question and the various rent supplements are we treat them very differently. So this kind of conversation is not, or the end of operating piece is slightly different there. These are all different contracts that we have with various landlords and also not-for-profits. So that's why it's various, because it's not just one kind of agency or one name. We are obviously, with the rent supplement piece, there are some kind of end dates in these contracts. We are also working on the portable housing benefit rollouts, which is going to ideally also add to some of those numbers. So that's definitely an important piece of this, but for the purpose of this report, not necessarily something we're looking at in this EOA context. For the Townhomes Kingston question, I feel like that is again not necessarily relevant to this specific report. Obviously, there is a lot of information that is brought forward to council to keep council updated on where the service manager is in the work on not only mitigating and kind of working with Townhomes Kingston to make sure that As you know, I think Commissioner was in council a few weeks ago to kind of give an update, and obviously we are still working on the bigger kind of conversation. Council gave the service manager direction to look at the merge or the kind of the opportunities to combine Townhomes Kingston and KFHC. So obviously important elements, but not necessarily for the purpose of this report.
Okay, so now I would look for a mover for the motion. Councillor Neal, a seconder, Councillor Stanek. And I'll open it up to for comment, further questions to staff as well.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I noticed on social media, Tippy, the First Nations group, has received a provincial grant. Is that like our other housing supplement programs? Is that managed by the city? And I noticed that it is inviting people who qualify to find an apartment and then come and register and get the supplement at that time. Do we have similar programs for the people on our waiting list as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with the grant that they received, so I don't think I can comment on that specifically. From what you're describing, it sounds like our portable housing benefit program, which works fairly similar. So, however, that works. We are looking at our existing wait list, our centralized wait list, and the portable housing benefit rollout. We have a provincial and a local program. Works fairly similar. So if you are on the social housing wait list and you are basically on the top, we are offering that as an option as well, which in a nutshell, and there's lots of details, but in a nutshell means that we can say you can find a rental unit. Does not really matter where it is. Obviously, there's a specific rent capacity that we would fund people that would be interested in that. So it sounds like a fairly similar program, but I don't know the details. I can look into that for sure.
Because many people that have spoken to me that are on that waiting list, I think could benefit from that kind of a program because for whatever reason, yeah, but I realize that. I'm wondering, do we just make that option available to the people at the top of the list? Do we inform them that is a program that they could qualify for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so we have already been rolling out this, so there are two types of programs for the portable housing benefit. So there's a provincial program and there's also the local program that council passed earlier this spring. So we first started to roll out the provincial program, which is a special priority program. So that program we started because that's kind of the first part of our wait list is people with special priority, meaning people that have experienced domestic violence or human trafficking. So we have been rolling out that program, and now we're rolling out actually in the next few weeks. We're starting to connect with people that are on the wait list that would potentially be interested in the local portable housing benefit that the council kind of approved. So that is based on chronological wait list. What we will do is obviously, we anticipate that not everybody will take that opportunity. So we're kind of reaching out to the first kind of section of the wait list, and then we'll move forward. So it is still based on chronological wait list. Tipimosa, because they have a special kind of group that special kind of population that they focus on, there might be a different approach, but I'm not familiar with that. So
that's a totally separate program, separate from the city's grants.
Councillor Neal, this really isn't on topic. It's not really on topic. It's not what's in front of us. What's in front of us is consideration for principles and conditions under which.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a handle on what.
No, I understand
on
that, and
that
that's why I
program,
let it go
so.
on, but
Okay,
I'm just saying.
thank you.
And I realize that, just as when we were talking before the meeting even, that the facts matter. You know, whatever the facts, the context happens to be, especially when it's as complicated as childcare or housing. So anyway, I'm wondering if anyone has any comments or questions about the principles under which the city staff propose to negotiate with housing providers. I've got a few. So I have somebody else, it's protocol that the other people come first. So, but if I'll start, then it might provoke the rest of you enough that you will have questions about questions about questions. So, in the beginning, you're talking about in the beginning, this is page 11, 4 of 8. So basically, I'm going to ask a question to straighten out what we were talking about before, because it matters, because it's in the context of the principles. And that is, when downloading took place back in 2001, under the then Social Housing Reform Act, did the city take over all the costs of housing? Not for all the little programs. I'm talking about the particular providers of units. I mean, they have all kinds of little bits about, you know, for supportive housing and all that. That's separate. Let's just put that aside for the moment. And so my understanding was that the city was footing that bill. That's what downloading meant. So could you miss out on that?
I was not here in 2001, but it is my understanding that we have been also starting to absorb the cost of housing back in 2001. I don't want to speculate. I would have to maybe fact check that.
And that fund for the houses or apartments is purely property tax money. That's the problem. It's a big problem. That's what they did. And it's not coming from the... Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so I just wanted to get that straightened away. And legally, as far as we know, legally obligated to maintain the RGI units beyond the EOA. That's what it says right here. I'm just making sure I understand this properly. And we are not allowed to opt out. Like, it's an ongoing responsibility. So basically, what it boils down to is yet more downloading, right? Okay, okay, wonderful.
So
and,
can I, one clarification?
Sure.
So there has been obviously a significant, or the federal government, and there has been a bilateral kind of arrangement between the federal government and province. So we have been receiving funding. However, we also know that that is ending as well. So I don't know exactly what it looked like in 2001, if there was some sort of mix of municipal and maybe some federal, but I know that moving forward, we are going to, there is obviously that pressure on the municipal tax dollars.
So I was involved in the second. So what happened was they downloaded all the provincially controlled housing. They didn't control all the co-ops. The co-ops, they controlled some of them, okay, but not all of them. And the federal co-ops, after a ton of organizing and proselytizing the governments, were uploaded to the feds. They took them because they were the cheapest type of housing, okay? Not in quality, just they cost less than operate.
Can we just add just one little bit? Because a lot of this has to do with mortgage payments. These end of operating agreements have to do with the end of the payments for the buildings. That's what the dates are, when the mortgages are paid, which have been subsidized from the time they were built. So there has been this subsidy from federal and provincial governments for the buildings, which is a lot of money. And when these operating agreements end, there's no more money. So the buildings survive on their rents, and that means there's no money to fix them up. The rents won't cover the operations. It's really, that's the disaster part. When the mortgages are paid, all bets are off from the federal and provincial governments. They cease having any responsibility.
But the money was not, yes, the subsidy, not for the provincial component. When they downloaded it all, as far as I know, they downloaded the cost of everything. The RGI subsidy, the cost of the buildings, it all came down to the municipalities. For the federal government, it's different. They continued to pay the subsidy, right? But the same thing happens. And at the end of agreement, then those co-ops, they're mostly co-ops, but they're not-for-profits too. Marion might be one of them, is that right? It's federal, it says in here someplace. Doesn't matter, whatever they are, that money stops. And so you have all these low-income people reliant, and their organization reliant on that subsidy dollars, those RGI dollars, and they don't have it. So what happens? Effectively, it's economic eviction. That would be the result. Or, and this is why you talk about, the staff talk about the moral obligation. We don't have a legal obligation, but we have a moral obligation to do something about this, which I agree with, but you know, there's slippage is possible here, obviously. And there's a number of different ways to handle this, as far as the RGI part of it is concerned. Like, if your mortgage ends, for example, you have that mortgage money that you've been paying, and that can be reallocated to the RGI side if you choose to take that route, which when I was in charge of a co-op, that's the route I told them to take. You do that, and you can do, if you rejig the rules about how to calculate, and that's what this, and this is on topic incidentally, because that's what they're talking about. Right, Ms. Norgard? Okay, so, and you can make it cheaper and actually have some, I did this, so I know exactly how it works. You can actually have some money left over for capital replacement. You can actually make this kind of work. It's not ideal. No, if they're all RGI, you're screwed. Well, you do have the mortgage money, but and the other thing is, if they're on social assistance, which the city-oriented ones tend to be, then every month they have a deep amount, like say it's $700 for the unit and 600 of it is RGI, you're going to be really pressed to find that. So what you'll do, I suggest, is you charge the upper amount you can against ODSP and OW, right? I don't even know if it works for OW, but because it's so low. But you can scrap around there and try and find the money. But it's a disaster. That there are some mitigating aspects to. Anyway, Councillor Neal.
Yeah, I think that's the whole idea that a sustainable model probably will have to be, and I support this, mixed affordable housing, which, lo and behold, is the co-op model for as long as we've had co-ops. So, and having been a past president of a co-op here in town, I know that you set aside a certain amount of capital for replacing appliances every 12 years or whatever the model is. And so clearly that has to be part of it. My concern is, and I know townhomes had, although I'm not sure the city was aware of it, had taken out had remortgaged in order, we became aware, had remortgaged their properties in order to raise money for a development project. Now, I don't want to get into the lack of information that perhaps the city had, but that to me seems like if you're revitalizing the North End, or a developer like we talked about before has land and would like to develop some mixed affordable units, that might be a logical way for them to seek financing. But would that jeopardize, like, is it the existing mortgage that has to be paid off? Could they remortgage and be able to add to our mixed affordable housing stock?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I just kind of quickly go back to the sustainability as well as for the state of the buildings and kind of investment. So what we, as one of the principles, you will see that we, as service manager, have done a building condition assessment for all the buildings that we are, or the projects that we're working with. So we have a fairly good understanding of the state of buildings and the viability moving forward. To Councillor Neal's question or comment, absolutely. We as a service manager, and I have to state that as the province, there's not a lot of best practices out there on how to approach this EOA process. We're one of the first, and a lot of people are asking questions, and I think we're just also kind of taking it step by step. But with the few providers that are coming up now, there are absolutely conversations around remortgaging or taking equity and investing it in new affordable housing development, which is something we would fully support, and obviously would also allow for more mixed use, mixed development. Most of the providers that we are working with already have a range of market and RGI units. And as you might have seen as well in the principles, is we are also looking at what are these providers currently charging for their market units, because we do also have some expectations that they also utilize those units to offset some maybe deeper investments in RGI. So there's definitely, all those conversations are absolutely happening, and we are, again, based on some legal supports, we are we are able to do that. And also currently, I mean, obviously we still have our existing agreements. We are kind of able to say yes or no if providers are interested in taking out equity.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, just on that very point, okay? Under the principle maximization of housing provider revenues, I just wanted to say that we expected that market units each project be a minimum of 80% of average market rent. I think that's a really crude way to do it. It should be based on income. So some people are paying, basically the concept is, I'm not saying I'm telling you anything you don't know, the concept is that no one will pay more than 30% of their gross monthly household income, right? So that means in a mixed income provider project that there are people that are not paying 30%, but they may not be able to really afford 80% of market. Two things are not the same, because I'll give you an example based on my own experience. In the co-op I managed, we started off with what they called economic rents, which are roughly like 80%, but this is back in the 80s, okay? So what happened is that over the years, we weren't maximizing profit. So we kept the percentage of rise to just, I don't know, and the whole time I was there, probably averaged out to, I think it was 1.9%, like inflation. Well, the difference between a 2-bedroom in the co-op which someone on modest income can afford without subsidy, and the market is this. It's about 200, and when I left, 200 and, I can't remember exactly, for 2-bedroom upper, 226 or something, it's versus 1,050. 80% is more than that. So this is too crude a measure. And I want to encourage you to think about it in terms of income. They would be paying an appropriate amount of money according to the principles of RGI calculation, but not be in a good position to pay 80%. Because 80% of 1,000 is 800, but it's more than that. It might be even 1,100. Now, I don't know what a 2-bedroom is right at the moment. But you see what happens, okay? It's easy to see what happens to people in that. So that's one criticism I have of this principle. I understand where you're going and why you want to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the way to get there. You need to think, try and be nice, okay? in a more sophisticated way about what is actually going on the ground.
Yeah, and if I may, absolutely. This is not kind of a blanket approach. It is something that, if possible, given the context, or kind of it would be desirable, but there's absolutely some discretion there. And also, I think the average market rent conversation is pretty crucial, because average market rent is based on our CMHC rates, which you could argue are not always as affordable in kind of the bigger kind of affordable housing conversation. So we are absolutely aware of it. If possible, we would like to move towards more income, or we would like to kind of, we have some providers that we know that definitely have people that are in the market units, but would be very close to RGI level income. So we are aware of that. It's just kind of trying to find a way to be, to kind of be a little bit more, focus a little bit more on the financial sustainability, if possible.
Councillor Neal.
Just wait, I think that may be a fantasy of CMHC that define affordable as 80%. And the problem in a city like Kingston, which may have the highest rents of any city our size in Ontario, 80% of that inflated rate is pretty substantial. And so I think we need to find a more humane way of defining affordable than just applying the CMHC figures. So.
Anybody else on that principle? I'm just going to move through these, okay? Because I understand you're trying to make a balance here, and I think that's only reasonable. The unit, one that says housing unit composition needs to reflect demographics of the service manager area and the centralized wait list. If you followed that principle, you would impoverish parts of the city that are not necessarily impoverished now overall, because you've got mixed income, right? But if you give too much weight to the people on the centralized wait list system, they really need housing, I agree. And most of them, like, what? Nearly 2/3 of them are 1-bedrooms, right? They need 1-bedrooms. And they are really quite poor, right? But if you apply that principle, like you've got two principles here. One is you want mixed income housing. That's what we've tended to move towards, as Councillor Neal was saying. If you apply this too much, you will undermine that. And so I'm interested in knowing how you expect to balance those two. Because you change the whole social fabric of a community, right? Or provider community, if you have too many people who are desperate, okay? You can actually socially deal with more of them, and the people around them can deal with them and help you actually manage that if you don't have too much of this. Okay, so like we may be making problems. We've put too much weight on this principle. So, those are the two that I have the most problem with, and from my point of view, we should have more detail.
If I may comment on the demographics piece and the wait list. I think this kind of goes hand in hand. We, as you might know, we are also working on, or we're going to, or mandated on reviewing our 10-year housing and homelessness plan through a 5-year review process. And part of that, we need to do some more work on understanding our wait list, our current wait list, and understanding who is, we know who's on the wait list, but we don't necessarily know why they're on the wait list and what their specific needs are. So this principle is really kind of here in the context of making sure that we understand who is in need for housing and what their needs are. So it's not, it's kind of meant to be as a way to know what we are looking at moving forward. And if we are having conversations with providers that let's say there's nobody, hypothetically, there is only 1-bedroom units requests on the wait list, and we have a provider that only provides 3-bedroom RGI units, maybe that could also kind of dictate or kind of help us with the negotiation. So maybe it's a different context, or maybe, I don't know if that helps your concern, but it's really meant to make sure that we have a good handle on who's on the wait list, and that also helps with the conversations around the supply and demands moving forward.
You covered that in part in another, about the conversions, but then somebody has to supply that capital. The question is who, right? But I think for everyone in the sector, they know that 3 and 4 bedrooms are less in demand, so you're going to convert them to 2 bedrooms or something. If the construction allows you to do that in some kind of successful way. So I do understand what you're getting at there. It's not clear to me exactly how all that fits together. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So any other questions? So we have the motion on the floor. Does anyone have anything more to say or amendments? Councillor Neal.
Just very quick, in talking to our colleagues, both the new and the returning, we all heard at a lot of doors the issue of affordable housing, and particularly of homelessness. So I think there's a motivated council that's going to be looking for ways to achieve that. And I had an opportunity to talk to the mayor, and he seems to be on board for making something happen sooner rather than later as well. So I guess I really appreciate the work that's gone into this report, but my sense is it's going to be very much a kind of moving target and an evolving process as we go along. And so I appreciate this as a kind of statement for this time and place, but I'm looking forward to moving forward with addressing particularly that enormous wait list that we have.
And through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, absolutely. Obviously, we're very much aware, kind of managing within housing and social services, both the homelessness portfolio and the social housing and affordable housing portfolios. It's kind of our day-to-day concern. And I think with the new council and the 5-year review, which obviously is going to be in council, and we're going to include our Housing and Homelessness Committee very significantly into that conversation. I think that's an excellent opportunity to keep this conversation going. There's a lot happening that some of the things we don't know for sure how it's going to look like. There's obviously a lot of provincial and federal relationship there as well. And there's a lot of work done within the planning department to kind of allow for development. So it's I absolutely agree, it's a very complex issue. Affordability is a big conversation, and I think there's some additional context to that. I don't think necessarily it's only building housing or developing housing, it's also supporting our community members with the right supports to make sure that they can maintain their housing. So I think it's a very complex issue, and I'm really obviously very kind of glad that it is on the radar of many.
And I can only speak for myself, but I would be shocked if housing and homelessness, addressing that issue, doesn't come out as one of the top priorities of the upcoming council. So clear your desk and sharpen your pencils, because there's going to be lots coming, I hope.
I think I started at the right time.
Okay, so I'm concerned about the principles insofar as how they will be viewed and how they will be balanced. And I mean, the elements are fine, I think, largely. But I want to make an amendment here that's fairly simple. And so I'm going to move, I can get a seconder, and I'm going to give up the chair right now. So who's the vice chair? Councillor Schell, if you could, yeah. It doesn't say on there, it's not fair, right? Yeah, so I'm going to give.
I'll take the recognize you.
Thank you very much. So my motion is that it be, that, I guess the whole thing is the house, no, it's just the lower part, right? That we're dealing with, right? That council endorse and then put in there, in principle, the end of operating agreements, principles and objectives as presented in report number 18006. And if I'll speak to that briefly.
Do we have a seconder?
Okay. So the reason is that I would like to see it come back. The principles and the nature of what this is extremely important to a lot of people who are dependent, through no fault of their own, largely, with their circumstances. And so I would like to, what I'm trying to do is have it come back so we can have, when staff has thought through it more on some of the things we've said and how they're going to balance these elements of these principles. And so I don't want to just endorse it flat out. I want to say, in principle, yeah, you can go ahead, we can negotiate even on this, but we want to see more about how it's going to work out in detail. And so that's the purpose of my motion. If we say in principle, it's got to come back at some point. And maybe before the conclusion of the first EOA agreement or something like that, but that's negotiable too, right? And we have meetings before that'll ever happen, right? So that's the point, and just that. Okay, all right. I have a suggestion to add to my amendment. Right. Okay. So, did everybody hear that? Okay. So, staff has made a good point, and that is that, in principle, it's sometimes kind of vague. I was kind of worried about that myself, but I wanted to get short and to the point. And that it's been suggested that we add to the motion, the amendment rather, and that staff report back. When? Q2. At the end of Q2. Does that sound like a look from staff about that?
No, and I think that I think we are obviously already from a time and place kind of, or from a kind of time sensitivity piece, we do kind of want to pursue the conversations. And absolutely, I think the idea of basically updating council on how things go and maybe how principles kind of are more kind of detailed moving forward, I think that's doable as long as it's not, as long as we as a service manager can continue the conversations, because we obviously need to have those conversations and they typically take some time.
Okay. Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean. I know that business has to continue, okay? So,
And from a timeline, end of Q2, I think would make sense, because we will have some clarity about the first three.
right, and it can be done in a timely way. Like, you don't have to wait to the end of Q2 if it turns out, oh no, we want to conclude agreement before this. This is how it's working in this case, right? And then at some point, we're not going to want to see every agreement you ever come to. It's just the bigger ones we're probably going to want to know, right? But it'll work. So again, at staff's is said that staff report and that staff report back to ARC before the end of Q2 2019 regarding the principles outlined in the report in further detail. Okay, the numbers are all there. So that's really,
Maybe we should read the whole thing, just
yeah.
start to end, please.
And you can let us know what you think.
Sorry, I just points of clarification. Are we, because I think the challenge are kind of as a service manager, we want to move forward and we will have to kind of also have some agreements in place at some point. I think I'm kind of just thinking, do we basically give an update how things go and do we wait with the actual agreements? Because I'm wondering, do we present the actual agreements in principle to ARCP, or is it more of an update on the principles moving forward based on the insights that we gain when we are going through the conversations and negotiations?
As the secretary, speak to what I thought the intent of this was, and that was just that we would receive ongoing updated information reports. In no way did I intend this motion to delay you as service managers doing your job. That's the
my
intent of the mover
understanding,
as
too.
well.
Yeah, continue
yeah.
negotiations and on these broad outlines, just that it's not clear how they're all going to fit together. Now, they will probably vary according to project as well, so the weightings of each, right? But I think the idea is to have some increasingly clear picture about where we're going and whether it's going to work for people or not. Because frankly, the ones you've got, the three that are coming up, are not typical, right? They're not big, right? So from a number of different perspectives, right? So I agree with the seconder that you can continue. And what I'm intending to say to you is, if you realize, oh, we don't want to wait to June, we need to have this in place by April, May or something, then just come and say, look, this is what, and if that's okay. Now,
Yeah.
and then again, not in the future, I'm not thinking we want to see every one of these. We just want to see how you're going to do it.
Yeah, and just from a point of clarification, we also have obviously our Housing and Homelessness Committee where we would bring this forward initially, and I think that would be the path moving forwards. And we do obviously use that committee and provide regular updates on a lot of the various projects we work on, including this end of operating piece. So I think it already kind of automatically would move into this committee as well.
Yeah, but quarterly, so it's not going to do you much good, okay?
I think we should hear the info just one more time, just to make sure we're not tying staff hands, because these do become legal.
So the first clause remains unamended, but I'll read it. The council endorsed the end of operating agreements, principles, and objectives as presented in report number HHC 18-006, and that staff report back to ARC before the end of Q2 2019 regarding the principles outlined in report number HHC 18-006 in further details.
Okay?
So are there any more comments before I call the vote on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor? Oop, sorry. And on the motion as amended, any other comments? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. I return the chair.
No, we have to adjourn. There are no motions, no notices of motions, no other business, no correspondence. Date and time of the next meeting is February 28th, 2019, unless at the call of the chair, I presume, and whoever that may be. And so, adjournment, a mover, Councillor Shell, Councillor Bone, seconder. All those in favor? Okay, passed. Opposed?